Evening, everyone. Good evening to you. It's late at night here on Wednesday night. It's 9:35 p.m. my time. So if you go hollering at me on Thursday, if you go hollering, "Hi, Brother Bruce," and all that on Thursday, I can't talk back to you because this is Wednesday night. It's 9:35 my time, and I realize that's late for some of you, but the purpose for me doing this is I can do this and then put it on YouTube pretty easy, and I wanted to make this, for a long time, I wanted to put this message on YouTube. I have it in a sermon that I preached, so privileged to preach to some of the nicest people in Alabama, Brother William Holmes and those brethren down there, and they're going to have the Feast of Passover. I wish I could get down there and be with them for that wonderful celebration. It's a wonderful time in the Lord. But at any rate, I wanted to get this on YouTube, so I thought this would be a good way for me to do it, is to just put it here on the Facebook, and then I could transfer it. And it talks about revival in Argentina. In 1950, there was a big revival there with a man by the name of Tommy Hicks. Now, I'm going to tell you a long story about all this. And incidentally, anyone that wants to go and verify this, there are old pictures on YouTube showing the massive crowds, pictures of the great miraculous things and people that came to Christ by the multitudes. And the story is there, and there's a lot of newspaper ads that are there. You can look those up, and they're all in Spanish because, as you know, Argentina, they spoke in Spanish. But let me tell you what has led up to me wanting to do this long overdue program here. Years ago, I knew a man down here in Sikeston, Missouri, that's very close to where I live, and his name was Arthur Wessel. He's dead now. He was an elderly gentleman, and I will tell you up front, he was somewhat of a crank. He was pretty rough and gruff. He was totally German, and he had been raised in a young boy. His father was the pastor of the Baptist church they were a part of. It was a German church. He said they sung in German. His dad preached in German. They all spoke in German. It was a German church out in California, and he, as a young boy, went there. Later on, he went amongst some Pentecostal people, and I'm not here to debate doctrine or try to make one group look. We all need to be lifting up the Lord Jesus, and that's where salvation is anyway. And so, at any rate, this was an old fella. He knew a man that had came from what was called the Azusa Street Revival, which is key for those of us who are of the Pentecostal persuasion. And if you're not and you don't believe in any of that, that's all right. I don't have time to contend and strive and argue and defend my place. We're just going to state the facts. And I've told folks, if I post something you don't like, you scroll on by it. You know, it's just that simple. But good evening, Sister Frida. And so anyway, this man that I got to know, I'll say one thing about the gruff old fella. He had been in part of that. Good evening, Jason. He had been in part of those meetings back in the 30s, and they just weren't what they were today to him. It kind of reminded me of the story when the children of Israel went in captivity and they come back and they rebuilt the temple, and some of them were shouting about that. Others were weeping and crying because they remembered the former temple, and this one just wasn't even nothing like it. And they cried and some shouted. Well, that's the way Brother Wessel was. He remembered those old revivals back then. And don't ask me to explain that, but I would visit him on a regular basis. Okay, Maxine, I see you. Just stick with this. This may prove to be interesting. I don't know. I'm going to give it here, and then I want to put it over on YouTube. Anyway, Brother Wessel, I'd go down and see him. And when he got talking about those old days and revival and the things, the masses and the crowds, and he'd say, "Oh, you never seen nothing like it." He would get all excited and said they would bring ambulances there, and said they would leave emptying. Now, some people don't believe in all of that. That's all right. My Uncle Herman told me the story many times in Sunday school as a young boy, how my Aunt Mildred took the local school teacher with her son down the road to what was called the William Branham Tabernacle. And the boy had something, he was all messed up. I can't remember the story quite well, but crutches and all, and said he'd come back and was totally well. Never did need all of that stuff anymore again. And I heard a few stories like that as a child, and it stirred my interest. At any rate, back to my story, Brother Wessel was a man that longed for revival, and he talked about those old days so much. And when he'd do that, there was a part of me that could touch a part of that. I don't know how to explain that. And his wife would slip over on the piano, and she'd begin gently playing the old song that I love so much. My Jesus, I love thee, I know thou art mine. For thee all the follies of sin I resign. My blessed Redeemer, my Savior art thou. If ever I love thee, my Jesus, 'tis now. And we would sing that. And I would look over there at that old man, and he was kind of harsh in his demeanor and his words, and rude once in a while. But as we began to sing those songs, his throat was cracked, and he graveled and tried to sing. But you'd look, and he would begin weeping, sitting there and weep, and he'd stare off in. And I'm telling you, it was glorious. You can think what you want, but I felt more of the power of the Lord there in that little trailer, and sitting with him and talking about those things, than in many church services I attend nowadays. Anyway, in an effort to spark revival in my heart, he kept talking of revival. One of the last times I talked to him, he said, "I want to tell you," in that old gruff voice, he'd tell you something. He said, "Listen to me now. When I go home and pray, or when you go home and pray, tell him, Lord, there's some people down here been waiting on revival for a long time, and said we're getting tired, so please send it quick." And I don't want to discredit any of the movements that there have been today, and I'm not going to take time to fool with that. And at any rate, he would talk about those old days, and he told me, he said, what he's seen today just doesn't compare to it. He said, I want to see real visitation, where they saw revivals where taverns shut down. Gail Jackson, who was an evangelist back in the 50s, went to a town, and there was a carnival there, and it had to leave town. Everybody was going to the revival. Nobody was going to the carnival. And so anyway, he remembered days like that, and he just never, although we may have some good meetings and good things, and I don't want to detract or take anything away from that or criticize it, but they pale in comparison to those great meetings where cities were shook and places of vice were shut down in some places, and thousands of people were known to come to Christ. Miraculous, not this bunch of fakery and phoniness, but real, true, genuine healings took place. I've talked to some people who were back. They're old people. They're dead now. And some of the miraculous things it took. One man I knew had been given 3 months to live. His liver was ate up with cancer. He went and made a trip to Jeffersonville. His wife took him laying in the back seat of a car. And William Branham prayed for him. And you know what? It's nearly 50 years later, and the old fella's still alive, doing good. So don't tell me those things don't happen. Nevertheless, back to Brother Wessel. In an effort to try to spark revival in my life, he gave me a little book called Thy God Reigneth by R. Edward Miller. It's a story of revival in Argentina. There it is, right there, if you want to see it. Well, I took it, and I tucked it away. And I never did read the book. Well, I have studied. I had an experience. You can believe it's of God. You can believe whatever you want. I quit trying to convince people and argue for my stand a long time ago. I can't defend the movement because it's winning the way of many. I'm very ashamed of what it's become in most places, and I'm sorry, I'm ashamed of it. Don't have time to comment. I'm not here to lambaste, but I'm ashamed of some of the outright junk and nonsense, the extremes, the hype, and the people working people up and get them whipped up like circus horses, and it's all man-made, a lot of it. And they tell me it's a great outpouring. Well, I've been disappointed in some of those great outpourings I've been to. Anyway, but I studied many of the old evangelists of time past, William Branham, Jack Cole, Gail Jackson, some of the older ones back, and I studied the life of, I know his name as well as I know my own, but he raised orphans. He was known for raising some of the other, Spurgeon, Finney, Sankey, all those men of the past. I studied them, of those great revivals, the Welsh revival with Evan Roberts, all of those things. Great working, deep workings in the heart of men and women by the Holy Spirit of God. When I hear them tell their story, these people were deep in the Lord. And the others, the Christ has experienced, T.L. Osborne, even some of the others whose names I could mention, that Jack Cole and all the others. And so I had heard, I'd got an encyclopedia of all their names over there in my books. I'd heard of Tommy Hicks. He was known for the Argentine revival. The word was he went down to Argentina and had a revival there. That was all I knew of it. I've got a radio broadcast that's on 3 times a week. If you ever want to listen to it, all you got to do is go to WXAN FM, 9 o'clock on Saturday morning Central Time, 4 o'clock on Sunday and Monday evenings, and Central Time. Just put WXANFM or .com and click on listen. When it comes up, you can listen to my broadcast. But anyway, a lady that listened to my broadcast called and said, I noticed you've got knowledge of some of these people of the past. And I send out books. I just sent out another packet today of people that want stuff. If they're interested, I've got it here from those old days from going by. And anyway, she asked me, she said, do you know anything about Tommy Hicks? I said, all I know is he held a big revival in Argentina. And she began talking to me, referred to another article about him. And after she got done, I was decided at that point that I said, I got that book that Brother Wessel gave me years ago, this one here, and there's no need for you to look for it. You can't buy the book anymore. This was dated 1960 something or another, 61 or no, 64, 19, and so you can't get it. However, this man that wrote it, Mr. Miller, Brother Miller, he has died, but his son took his ministry, and they took the book and incorporated it into another one called Secrets of the Argentine Revival. And there it is. If you can see the big masses of people there in the front, that's what happened. And I want to talk about that just a moment. I got this book out and read it. And I can't help it, but it done something to my heart. And well, we're talking about revival, Deb. And you'll have to go back and maybe listen to some of this to see an elderly gentleman in Sikeston. He's dead. I loved him. I loved that old man dearly, and he'd chew me out. He's just very harsh and rude, but I loved him, and he'd talk about this, and we'd sing, and his wife would play wonderful times. And I put another video on YouTube called A Letter from Smith Wigglesworth, who, those of you that come from a Pentecostal background, Wigglesworth died in 44 or somewhere 45, I don't know, somewhere along in there, but he's one of the great giants of the Pentecostal movement, and his book and his story will stir you. Well, this man had a letter from him, this brother that gave me this book, and he brought it out. It was post-dated 1939, Bradford, England, and I did a video about that. If you want to see more about it, you go to my YouTube videos, and I've got one on there called Letter from Smith Wigglesworth, and I read the letter. He had wrote Wigglesworth wrote him back from Bradford, England. I saw the envelope. I saw the original letter. He let me tell you, be careful now, it's old, you want to handle it. Chew me out every time I moved. But anyway, I looked at it. The handwriting so terrible and bad, I couldn't read it. And so I took the letter, and he typed out, he said he'd give me a copy he was always, if you want to come back next Thursday at so-and-so time. He's very punctual like that. But I come back, he typed out what the letter said because the handwriting was so poor. and he made me a copy of it. I keep it in my Bible today. I made a video of it, and it's on YouTube if you want to see what it's all about. It is unlike anything you'll get if you write preachers nowadays. Totally unlike it. Deep, very deep. And so anyway, after this lady called me from the radio station, know anything about Tommy Hicks? I just know he had a revival, Well, I decided to come in here and get this book out that I'd had for years that Brother Wessel had gave me. It's just a little thin book, but I read the account. I was never so moved in all my life as when I read the account of that great out. And I went like I said, you can go to YouTube and you can look up Tommy Hicks Revival in Argentina, and it'll show you newspaper articles, pictures of it, massive amounts of people. This went on for some time, and even after he left, it spread into other parts of Argentina. Now, to those of you that have always told me, I've heard people say, you live in the past too much. You just, it's too much. You don't need to be looking back. Let's look forward at what, well, I got a verse or two of scripture I want to read to you just for that. Listen here what David said in Psalm, or it's actually the chief musician for the song Korah Maskil. It's a psalm of David here. In Psalm 44 and verse 1, he said this, we have heard with our ears, O God, our fathers have told us what work thou didst in their days in the times of old. Our fathers told us how you worked. That's the only thing we've got to go on, because I don't want to criticize anything God is doing anywhere in any church. But when I hear these stories of days gone by, either one or two things is going on. Either these guys were big liars all the way back to all the great reformers. Either they were liars, or we don't even know what revival looks like. We may have seen a little drizzle of it here and a little, but nothing like these meetings. At any rate, to prove my point a little further, in Deuteronomy 32, verse 7, it says, remember the days of old. Don't forget them. There's lessons to be learned. Consider the years of many generations. Ask thy father, and he will show thee, thy elders, and they will tell thee. Don't you imagine that there was maybe some guy, a little child here saying, tell us about it, Grandpa. Tell us again. Well, I wasn't there, but my great-grandpa was there the day that Elijah called fire down out of heaven. He told me he saw it with his eyes. We don't see much like that going on around here. It's not an everyday occurrence now. But let me tell you what happened. Elijah come walking down over there I imagine they told those stories and handed them down, and they didn't forget them. So I can't forget these stories. So I've laid this foundation, took nearly 20 minutes. Now I want to tell you the story of the Argentine revival with Tommy Hicks. Tommy Hicks was out of the picture until the thing really, he was the one that was used mostly in evangelism to do great and mighty things. And you, as I said, go to YouTube, you can look it up, you can see pictures of it. At any rate, this man, R. Edward Miller, in the late 40s, he was a missionary in Argentina. Now I've got to step the pace up here and try to go a little faster. And so we don't have too many on anyway, I don't think, but that's all right. I'm going to make this for YouTube. Tommy Hicks was in the United States in much fasting and prayer, from what I understand. Hungry. He was not satisfied with what he saw. We're too satisfied. We think it's normal to see churches closed down and our youth quit church and turn to things that's breaking our hearts. It's not. That's not the norm. Those men that experienced those great outpourings back then, they paid a price. Tommy Hicks did much fasting and prayer. Some churches don't even believe in that no more. Well, I don't do much of it now at my age, but I've done it in past, and that's not tooting my horn or nothing, but I'm telling you this from experience, it won't hurt you. And so he was doing that. Meanwhile, this gentleman, R. Edward Miller, was a missionary down there, seeing hardly no results, handing out tracts, knocking on doors, inviting people to church, and seeing no results. Week after week, a little meager handful of people there in his church, and very, very seldom a convert would come through. That's discouraging, folks. Excuse me. We just ate at the Mexican restaurant, and that's maybe I should have waited a while. At any rate, this disturbed the man. It would anybody that had any spirituality about them. And he went to another town and he erected a tent to have a little tent revival there. He said he was there for 10 weeks, or 10 days, I mean. He said during that whole time, not one person visited. Not one. He had examined his life. He was living the best he could. And he thought, he prayed, and he decided, you know, it's not because there's sin in our lives. It's not because our prayers are misdirected. Surely it's not the will of God for everything to just remain stagnant and stale and no true Christian testimony here, and the people lost and living in darkness and under all kinds of... See, in the book it explains there was all kinds of people that were steeped in paganism. And I went down way down into Mexico myself and been into some places, and I won't take the time, but my lands, you'll see it's a very real thing. Spiritualism and all that stuff, whatever you call it, is very real. So, at any rate, this man, after his 10 days there, he said that was enough. He couldn't take no more. So he went to God about it, and he was being paid by missionary alliances and all in the United States to do missionary work there. And he said, well, anybody that's being paid at a job back home said they work 8 hours. So he said, I'm going to give 8 hours a day to reading the Bible and praying. Oh, he probably stopped to, if he had to visit the bathroom, or maybe stop and eat a bite, what days he wasn't visited. But the man's soul was hungry, and he was crying out to God, what is wrong? What can I do? When I read the scriptures and the power that's promised to us through the Holy Spirit, Jesus said that in Acts 1:8, you will receive power after that the Holy Ghost has come upon you. Now, if I don't have power, either it hadn't come upon me, or we can say like some of y'all, it's not for us today. But Acts 2:38 and 39, verse 39 basically says, you will receive the gift of the Holy Ghost. Acts 2:38, he said, for the promise is unto you, to your children, to those who are afar off, even as many as the Lord our God shall call. Look it up and read it. Now, he began doing that, and I'm sure he stopped and ate or done a few things, but he remained doing that day. People thought he was losing his mind. He says in this book, he gives the account of it, that God finally spoke to him, or before he spoke, he said nothing. He never saw any sign of God doing a thing. He felt like his prayers were in vain, like the whole thing was a waste of time. Sometimes you may feel like that. I have. And at any rate, he prayed more earnestly, and finally he gave God, he said, I almost missed it, said I gave God a deadline, said this Saturday, the 5:30, if you hadn't done anything, I'm going back to handing out tracts, knocking on doors, and forget the whole thing. Well, 5:30 came, and God doesn't act on our time schedule, so nothing took place. So he gathers his Bible and some tracts, and he starts to head out the door, but one of the members of the church show up, and he has his son, and his son's in a mess. He's having all kinds of trouble. So they sit there, counsel and pray and pour in and pray and talk and share scriptures till the boy is doing a whole lot better. And so then it was too late for him to go out. And as he started to go back, he said, thank you, Kelly. He said that the Lord then spoke to him and said, see, I can bring them in any time. Now you go back to prayer. So he determined he wasn't going to break this cycle until God spoke to him and told him what to do to have a real, genuine outpouring where devil-possessed people. You see, we in the 21st century, we think demons and spirits, that's back there in the Dark Ages or well, in Jesus' day. They all went on vacation somewhere. No. Most of the horrible traumas and mental issues and sicknesses even that you see in many people is the root of it is spiritual in many cases. I'm not saying all, but many of them. I'm not against people taking medicine. But you can't fight those things with a pill. There's not a pill on the market will touch when it's demon activity that's laying behind the whole thing. Many of it's spiritual deficiency. There's something wrong in the heart, in the soul, that only Jesus can fix. After all, he came to set the captives free, and he came to do that in the 21st century also. And I'm telling you this in hopes that it will spark a fire in someone's heart, and we'll all be tempted to forsake our activities that keep us so tied up and go to a prayer closet to become so dissatisfied with status quo that we'll begin praying, because our country is all but gone. It's all but gone. You can blame which president you want. I blame sin. I blame the sin and the fact that as a country we've turned our back on God. Now enough of that. Let me get back to the story. So God speaks to Mr. Miller, and one day he says, I tell you what I want you to do. I want you to start a prayer meeting each night from 8 o'clock to midnight. Tell only those that will stay the full 4 hours to come. If you can't stay the full hours, just stay at home. He then said that it was getting cold during that time of year. They had no heat in those churches. I preached down in some places down in the mountains and all. Oh, man, was it cold. Had no heat neither. And so anyway, he said that he gathered together, announced that. And I think I'd have to reread it, but I'm pretty sure there was 4 people that showed up. One was a saintly woman, a real Christian lady. Well, it's all right. Say what you want about the sisters. They're usually the backbone of the church. Another was her husband. He was backslid and didn't want to even be there, but for some reason he came. There was another, what he called a meek, timid lass that wouldn't speak, said she was shy, so shy and quiet that she just sat down and wouldn't say or do nothing. Hi, Jenny, love you too, hon. It's my little girl. And said another person, there's 3 or 4 people there, and that's what he had. And said after praying, they just prayed a while and stayed there till midnight. He figured they won't be back. Nothing happened. Nothing took place. Nothing. He wondered, did I even hear from God? He I can relate to all of this. And, anyway, he goes on and says, he said, does anybody, now this is going to seem strange to all of you. You don't have to believe it, and you can think I'm cuckoo, but I believe it. The reason I believe it is because it's no stranger than some of the things I read in the Gospels. You think, oh, there wasn't nothing strange in the Gospel. Spitting and making mud and smeared it on a guy's eyes and telling him go wash in the pool of Siloam. I believe that's St. John chapter 9. Read it. You and I would conclude that's some weird stuff, and I don't think that's necessary for God to heal you. Well, Jesus did it. He spit, made some clay, and smeared it on a guy's eyes and told him, don't go wash in a trough, in a water trough. Don't go down at your neighbor. This was a blind man, and I had some people do a study for me, and where he was at in the temple to the pool of Siloam was a little over a half a mile away, and him blind. You think he didn't have a struggle? No, I didn't say wash off in that mud puddle. I didn't say wash off in that drinking trough for the camels. I didn't say stop that lady on the way and use water out of her. We try to seek an easier way, but if God gives specifics, for his own reason, he told Naaman, dip 7 times in Jordan. 7, not 6, not 4, not in another river, the Jordan River, that one. God gave him specifics. Told the children of Israel, march around the walls of Jericho 7 times on the last day. Do it once a day for 7 days. On the 7th day, do it 7 times, and then shout. Specific instructions. It's all throughout the Bible. Weird, strange as it may seem, go down and catch a fish. Open his mouth, there'll be a coin in there. Pay our tax with that. Jesus done so. He spit on one guy's eyes. Done strange things. You and I probably, as a church member, we saw that, we would have went, I don't think that's necessary. It's true. God doesn't need any of that. But for some reason, he tries man in these areas, and he did this night. Finally, Mr. Miller, he asked the people there, does anybody feel any? I know God spoke to me and told me to do this. Because I'm tired of coming here to a meager little handful of people, never seeing converts, not impacting the community, the devil running rampant in our streets, demon possession everywhere, witchcraft in an abundance. even in their, what they called their White House was called the Pink Palace. The president's wife was in there, and she had started doing all these seances and witches and all that stuff in their and the dictator of that country was a man by the name of Juan Perón. So bear with me, this gets kind of interesting. He said the meek, timid little lass, I read it and I heard him tell it on tape recording, said that, she said, I feel something, but it's nuts, it's silly. He said, what is it? She said, I feel like going up there and knocking on that table right there with my... And he said, well, come and do it. No, she wouldn't. He said she was so shy and timid. Said no matter how much he tried to get her, she just wouldn't do it. Come back the next night, same. It repeated 2 or 3 nights. And she just would not do it. Nothing else. He said, well, I tell you what. He said, I will go by and we'll sing a song and we'll march by it and I'll rap on it first and the rest of you, and said, you can just do it with. And she consented to that. As she went by and she hit the table, the power of the Lord fell on that little group of people. The man who was backslid, he repented, rededicated his life to God, and the Lord filled him with the Holy Ghost. The meek, timid, quiet little lass, she became a shouter and shouted, was filled with the Spirit of God, and even spoke with other languages or tongues and interpreted. They began prophet and all. People heard what was going on the other nights, and they the crowds picked up, and all of a sudden 2 or 3 people that the neighborhood knew was very sick, they got healed. That spread and it began stirring. Well, now Tommy Hicks, that I mentioned earlier in the video, he enters the picture somewhere along about here. And he tells that they got together with the churches and they're wanting to get together and have a citywide divine healing, salvation, revival. And Juan Perón was the dictator, and he was very tight. Said he didn't allow a lot of things, and he overseen any activities. He wanted to know everything that was going on if he would even allow it. Well, Tommy Hicks said, God spoke to me and told me to come down here and get a coliseum. We'll need it. They said, brother, God is doing some things, but we think a place that would seat 1,500 people would be a plenty big enough. He said, no, 15,000 maybe. And they thought, you're crazy. He said, well, I'm going to go talk to Juan Perón and get him. Said, I want media coverage. I want this one big stadium. I forgot what it was called. And they thought, oh, dear Lord, he's going to get us all. Well, he goes walking up there with a translator, and a guard stops him and says, who are you? Pulls a gun on him and says, who are you? What do you want? Comes to what's called the Pink Palace, where the president resided. And he said, I've come to have a divine healing, salvation, revival, and said, I'm going to pray for the sick. God will do wonderful things and turn people's hearts to God. And he said, you're out. Said, you ain't going in. He said, I want to talk to Juan Perón. Nobody talks to him. Said, get out of here. And he said, I really need. He said, do you honestly believe God heals people? And he said, I certainly do believe it. And do me a favor. I'll throw this in here. If I ever get sick, bad sick like that, get me somebody that believes that. If you don't believe it, please don't come here. You'll hinder my healing. You'll hinder the moving. Stay out. Get me some saints of God. I don't care if it's a woman or a man. Get somebody that believes in it that can pray and touch God for me. Now, at any rate, this guard holding a gun, he said he had terrible, I should have refreshed myself in the book. I think it was liver trouble or something. He was in terrible pain in his stuff. He said, I hurt so bad right now. Do you believe God will heal me? And Tommy Hicks said, absolutely. He then rebuked that thing, took him by the hand, and the pain left immediately. The man said, you come back tomorrow, and I'll get you in to see the president. So he come back. Now, Juan Perón had a skin disease. It was much like eczema, very bad. And he wouldn't let people take pictures of him or anything like that. I've got an encyclopedia over there with a picture of Tommy Hicks standing there with him. Well, Tommy was took in to see him, and he told him what he wanted to do. And so the dictator, the president, Juan Perón, said, tell me more. And he talked, and he said, see this mess on me? He had all broke out. He said, would God heal me of that? And Tommy Hicks said, certainly he would. And he said, well, let's see it. Very clear. Let's see a little of this divine healing. You believe? Come on, let's have it. Tommy Hicks took him by the hand and rebuked that foul thing. And let me throw this in here. Ladies and gentlemen, while God may use anything that happens here, I backslid away from God. I feel like God used that experience to help me out more along the way. But that's not saying God wanted me to backslide. Well, there's times that sickness comes into play and God will use it, but God is not the author of sickness. Sickness is a defilement. Don't quote me about Paul's thorn in the flesh. We'll have an argument about that right now. And I'll win. Because it says it was a messenger of Satan, a demon that buffeted him, struck him, harassed him, bothered him. Doesn't say nothing about him having a disease in his eyes and all that stuff. You believe what you want. But Jesus, if healing and taking sickness away from people is wrong, and sickness is a blessing, if it's such a blessing of God, or that you be sick, if God puts sickness on you, if you're convinced right now that God put sickness on you, then what are you doing going to a doctor trying to get out of God's will? And every doctor and nurse that's trying to fight against disease and this vaccine and all that kind of stuff that's going on, if it's God's will for you to be sick and have these things and diseases and all, then they're all working against the will of God to try to get you. And if it's so great, you ought to pray for your whole family to get a dose of it. Why is it on Facebook or on other forms of social media? I always see somebody, pray for me, I got an operation, pray for this. If you're determined God wants you to have that, why pray? Why pray against the will of God? And if it's, Jesus Christ revealed the will of the Father and of all that came to him. Now, there were sometimes people didn't come to him. He went to one pool and healed one person. The others didn't ask him a thing about it. Sovereignly, he does things like that once in a while. But the rest of the time, of all of them that came to him, everyone from a poor, sick man with leprosy to blind people to insane one man with his child that was throwing convulsions and fits, he said it was an evil spirit. And Jesus rebuked the evil spirit. He wouldn't have been allowed in many churches because they wouldn't have that kind of activity. We're not having that fanaticism here. Well, sit there and be dead then. So anyway, Jesus healed everyone that ever came to him. Sickness is not this wonderful blessing. We're to pray, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. You think there's hospital beds in heaven? All right, enough of that. So anyway, Juan Perón, the dictator, looks at Tommy Hicks and says, let's see. So Tommy Hicks rebuked that evil thing. Father, for the sake of Jesus Christ, heal this poor man. And all of a sudden that went away. The testimony is written. It can be proven. And Juan Perón, speaking Spanish, says, "Oh Dios mío, estoy curado." Anybody that speaks Spanish, do you know what that means? I'll tell you. He said, "Oh my God, I'm cured." At that time, he gave Tommy Hicks anything he wanted. All the backing, all the publicity, the newspapers. You can go on YouTube and see the newspaper stories of great healings and things like that. The first few nights, there wasn't too many there. But, as time went on and people began to report of healings, and newspapers began to report, they could not contain the people. People camped outside, slept there, stayed all night. A real genuine, that's people wanting revival. Jack Cole tells about, I believe it was in one city, Baltimore, New York, or one back in the 50s, that people at 5 o'clock in the morning would start waiting outside for the doors to open 6 o'clock at night. I've not seen anything like that. That's revival. That's people that's hungry, that want something from God. And they go the extra mile and pay the price for it, unlike most of us. Now, at this point, they overrun that Coliseum, and they had to fill another Coliseum. I believe it's called Hurricane or something like that. And they estimated somewhere over 100,000 people coming to that. You can look at the pictures. In this one book I've got here, there's masses of people that are there. And you know what? They had a visitation of God, and it sprung into other parts now of the country. Let me tell you what happened. The lady, the president's wife, They probably got some of it was in Spanish, but somebody wrote it down, then they translated them into English. And when I say prophecies, we think of this bunch out here predicting the future all the time. Prophecy in the Bible, read 1 Corinthians 14:1. It tells you the gift of prophecy. It's speaking to men to edification, come in the first person. For example, if I got inspired, very inspired speech, and all of a sudden you come to prayer and I said, has not I, the Lord, said, I'll be with you. I'll strengthen you. I'll be with you during this time. My son died for you. I love you, and all this kind of stuff. And I'll tell you very quickly an experience of mine when we were in Romania. When we were in there, I couldn't speak a bit of the Romanian language, so me and my wife was there, and they set a young girl down there. She was married, but she was very young, and she could translate for us what they were saying. Nobody went into shouting fits or trances or none of that weird, flaky stuff I've seen to go on in some of my circles where, and I love you, Pentecostals, but in some places there's been stuff go on that I'm sorry. It wasn't of God, and I wouldn't blame people for not wanting to come. Now, I said that, and that's mean, but you need to hear it. And at any rate, we were there, and there was a little man, he reminded me of Laura on Hardy, the little man that wore the little hat, and Ollie, he reminded me of him, and he rode around those towns on a bicycle with nothing but a Bible, preaching in villages. That's why he had no car, and he didn't have any money. He just depended on God. I admired that man when I learned all of that. But this man raised his hand. He was noticed by the people there, and they recognized him and brought him up. And the guy that carried us around in the van, his name was Audie, and he helped translate a little. He wasn't the best he couldn't understand some things, but most part of it he was. And those people knew him, but they didn't know me, didn't know I was coming. We went to a place called Huadine. They pronounced it Huadine. And at any rate, we went there for the service, and this little man got up, and he said this morning, he said, I went into a vision. Now, you may not believe in those things, and I don't think they're just something that happens all the time, and it's been abused. There's been fake. And listen, if there's counterfeit things like that, that's solid proof that there's a real. You ever seen any counterfeit $3 bills? No, because there's no real $3 bill. The devil always, to discredit that which is right, he will flood our ranks with a bunch of hype and a bunch of people in their own flesh and even his own demon spirits manifest to discredit the work of God. At any rate, this man got up and he said, I had a vision. Sometimes a vision is just a mental picture of the mind. And he said, in it, I saw Audie coming up in his van, and he said there was a man in there that I didn't recognize at all, didn't know him, but said after being here at church, he said, it's this man right here. And he pointed at me. And I thought, what's he saying? The lady translated, he's talking about, and said this. And he said, I saw in this vision, said this man had a beautiful white knotted robe, the best I could tell in the translation, and said I unfolded it out. My wife was standing over here to my left, and or to my one side of me, and said I unfolded it, and the words, I love you very much, was written on it. He then unfolded it out a little further, and it said, I love you both very much. He said at this time, a black, big two-horned goat, black, he said it was death, said it charged at your wife to kill her. And a voice screamed out from heaven and said, no, and said her life was spared. And I'm thinking, what's all of this mean? And some of you said, that mean nothing. Well, it may not to you. And you know something? If you don't believe, then it's not for you. You'll never get it because it's not for you if you don't believe. I believe. And anyway, he said, as I rolled that out, it said, I love you both very much. Said there was a medallion on the other end of it with a number on it. I forgot what it was. And said, this is a call of God. And said, if your wife joins and takes a hold of this and joins with you in that call, she'll live to be the age on that medallion. Said, if she don't, that black goat will take her out. Well, we got back home, and it wasn't but a year or so. Guess what happened? My wife was diagnosed with cancer. That's another story. Okay, Jenny, we'll see you. Good night. She has to go to bed and get up and go to work. At any rate, she was spared. Her life was spared. We've been 16 years cancer-free. The story is another story I tell the story in another one of my YouTube videos called My Experience with the William Branham Movement. Some good, bad, and ugly in that. But anyway, in the back of this book of this revival here, I'm going to read just some of these two. It was done in Spanish. There was a man interpreted what was said as tongues. Then the interpretation, you said, well, why did God do that? I believe that was just tongues. That was just the apostles being able to speak to people in other countries. Listen, number one, there were devout Jews in Israel or in Jerusalem that day on the day of Pentecost. To be a devout Jew, you had to speak Hebrew. They understood Hebrew. But they were speaking in the language of the country these folks come from. Yes, it was another language. But then if you'll read 1 Corinthians 14:3, the Bible says, he that speaks in an unknown tongue, he doesn't speak to men, and no man understands him. Nobody does, because in the Spirit he speaks mysteries. And Paul said, if you're going to stand up and address the church like that, somebody needs to interpret that in the Spirit so you'll know what message the Spirit is giving. And that's called a gift of the Spirit. I personally believe it's relevant for our time. Wasting your time trying to tell me any different. I've seen people put silly things on my YouTube account trying to refute, and I just ignore it or take them off or something. They don't want people to see how blind they are. Anyway, they took and they put this down in Spanish, what was being said. And one of the things, and it was translated out of Spanish into English and put in the back of this book here. One of the things they said is that God was going to remove that evil woman that allowed witchcraft, and that did. She come to America trying to get treatment, and it didn't help, and she died. And the vice president's wife started a Bible study in the Pink Palace, or what they called was the White House. That was a result of this revival. Now, I just want to read to you the gift of prophecy is not so much telling the future as it is inspired utterance to edify. Read it in 1 Corinthians 14, verse 1 and 2. Read that, and you will see that that's what it is. And I want to read just a few takes of that's in the back of this book here and see if it doesn't sound a little bit different than some of the phoniness I've seen today. He said, I'm not going to, a call to cleansing was this, and I ain't going to read the whole thing, but just this one part here. If you have not given, he said, I can without any difficulty take your heart and cleanse it. But how am I going to do it if you have not given it over to me entirely? You cannot give your heart over into my hands and maintain it yourself. It then goes on and says, without a clean heart, a humbled heart, I will not bless you. That's true prophecy. Without a clean heart, I, the Lord, will not bless you. That's prophecy. It's addressing people. It's speaking inspiration to them as though the Holy Spirit there is inspiring that to address that individual or congregation. He says, with egotism, personal pride, you will be nothing more than statues which I will take out of my presence. That wouldn't be, we'd get offended if somebody stood in our church. Let me read a couple more, and then I'm going to close the message here. Excuse me. It says here, rivers of virtue flowing out from me. They enter into you and flow out to the world. Rivers of virtue flow out of me into you and then into the world. That's what God wants. I just don't see it on a wide scale like it needs to be. Going ahead over here, and he says, do not permit your life to enter into lightness. Do all that is pleasing to me and subject yourselves to my will. This is prophesying. Walk in my way. Don't depart from it. For if you wander away with difficulty, you will return. I can tell you that. A person's been saved by the grace of God and then wanders out here in the world. He's out of place. He's of all men most miserable. He won't last because he don't belong out there, and he feels out of place, and people look at him and tell he don't belong there. And yet he don't belong in the church because he ain't living right. He's a miserable soul. So a call to prayer, it says. What are you seeking? What are you looking for? Seek God. What you are looking for is in my hands. The desire to cry unto me must burn in you. Wow. He goes, I can't read all of these. He says, my greatness is offered to you because you're thirsty. But you did not drink of the water I gave you. You drank of that which I did not give you. Do not think that because I do not go to you with manifestations of power and answers to your petitions that I've forgotten you. Do not think that I've forgotten you if you do not see my answer soon. All that you go through, praying in truth, brings you nearer to me. Call out, even though you see an impossibility before you. Everything is working out for good. Continue seeking me with patience and with continued humility. Seek refuge. I will not let you go and be overcome by the host of the enemies. Throw thyself into my hands. You will not perish, but my Son of righteousness shall shine before you. These are very interesting. Here's a call to victory. Behold, contemplate him who between heaven and earth was lifted up for you. The kingdom of my Father must be in the heart. It is not my fault if your desire is not fulfilled. I offer you even my very kingdom. I will give you all that I promised you, but do not think you're going to find it living lightly. It is not sufficient for anyone to have experienced the baptism of the Holy Spirit. I have much more for you. Be quiet about that of which you know nothing. Without me you are nothing, but I dwell within you, and without me you're nothing. You are but dust. Inspired speech, prophecy. Look only to me. Look not at the storm around you, because if you do, a ray of it will take possession of you. There's other verses here. I can't read all of this. If up until now you have not had the victory, will you abandon me because of this? There is a war. And he goes on and says more stuff there. And it was predicted that the president's wife, here's it says, she shall tremble with all her principal leaders and helpers. They shall know who God is. They shall be greatly terrified. Woe to them. Mentions her name here. It says, she shall see the thunder of my presence fall upon her heart. She and her faithful companions shall be great. They shall greatly tremble when they see me as I really am. And she died shortly after that. Now, I could go on reading that, but all I want to do is give you an idea of a wonderful, great manifestation of God in revival in Argentina. It just didn't come drooping down out of the sky, just come through the front door, people sitting there watching junk that they shouldn't be watching. No, it came after many, many days of fastings and prayer and agonizing. And I've got to ask you, I'm almost at an hour, so I want to quit. But I wanted so much to share this story, and I'm going to put it on YouTube if they'll let me put it. How hungry are you? Are you hungry? The condition of this country, I've asked people what we should, everybody will say, oh, we need to do something. I've asked them what to do, and I've had everything from, well, all we can do is pray. Is that all? The God that moves mountains and through prayers of people, we act as though it's a small thing to pray. It's a great thing. And, you know, I've yet to see someone say every church or to turn the lights on and be full of people over there crying, pleading, calling out to God, repenting. But we don't have nothing to repent over. We're wonderful folks. Jesus was talking to his church in chapter 3 of Revelation when he said, you're blind, miserable, naked, and you don't know you're in that condition. You see yourself as rich and increased with goods. And I can't judge you. I'm just telling you what Jesus said to a church. And I wonder a lot of times if we're in that shape because, honestly, I'm just being honest. We do not impact society the way we did at one time. Our country is drifting. Laws are being passed. Things are being done that trouble me. Our youth, my own relatives, kids, grandkids, doing things that just, I don't even know what to, And we got wild. I sowed some wild oats, but it doesn't even come near some of this stuff. Not even near it. I've looked at a couple of them, and what are you doing out in a graveyard conjuring up demons and stuff, standing out there, who doing and going on? Don't you know you're opening up to another world? You're inviting all kinds of trouble in. You see, as it said, the devil and sin, it'll take you a whole lot further than you wanted to go, and it'll keep you a lot longer than you wanted to stay. So I'm hoping that the story of this revival, that you can see by the stories of the past, that even though we're in the final hour, I'll agree to that, there's still hope for us. There's hope, even if the whole country wants to go the way of the devil. You and I in our little circles, we can have an outpouring of God on us. If the whole world says we want nothing to do with it, we can still have His presence in a great way, comforting us, speaking to us, blessing us, meeting our needs, healing our sick, drawing our loved ones back to Christ that have drifted. I believe we can have that. I'm hoping this will cause you to perhaps take it more serious. Turn the TV off at night. Sit with your spouse and you and them pray. Pray to God for the sake of our kids, for the sake of this country that's so, dear Lord, you don't have me tell. I'm not talking about passing this tax and that law and this. I'm talking about God is hated and despised, and you can't even put a Ten Commandment plaque up somewhere. We don't want that stuff around here. We're not going to teach kids to not kill and steal and honor their parents. It'd be awful to do something like that. But we'll tell them all kinds of rotten stuff that will damn their soul to hell somewhere. Well, my time is up. Thank you for those of you that are listening. I don't know how many we've got listening, how many's here, but it's late at night. I thank you for watching. To those of you that see this on YouTube, I hope and pray that it blesses you. Goodbye, everyone. Let the Holy Spirit stir you, and let us all, because there's nothing going to save this country. Nothing. Vote who you want. We could get some better people in office, but until there is a return to God and a reverence for God and respect, the country's just going to continue to decline under whoever you put in office. Open your eyes. Pass laws against guns all you want. That's not going to cure what's wrong with this country. Well, my time has come. I must go. Lord bless you, and we will see you later.